Hey guys, so Mike from Shimino's Workshop. Here's a part 2 video for the Satele Shan. But in this video, I'm going to go into more of an install of the chassis, which I have up on the Etsy store. As I explained in the first video, it's the chassis is a sled for each side, right? So, and it's comes in 3 pieces. So let me go in more depth. So main chassis sled. That's piece number 1. Stop it. Let me take this apart. In the first video, it was more focus on the hilt itself and what you'll need to do to break it down in order to install the switch PCBs. I warned you about the little spring, so work over something that can catch the parts as they fall. The hilt will come assembled in the single hilt mode, so you'll have to break it down. But the PCBs, the switch PCBs, are not installed. They'll come in a little baggie in the kit. So you'll have to break it down, break the emitter down and apart to install the PCB. Of course, you'll want to solder the wires in place first. There's a retention screw already installed in this hole, so you didn't have to do anything. So first part is right here, and if I recall, this is about 40 mil, and then I just extended it, I don't know, maybe 8 mil to hold the PCB. And so what I did was and up in the blade I have my 10 mil stock PCB holder, which is 10 mil tall. I get that wired and into the holder and then pushed down. On one of my hilts, the diameter was a little bit smaller than the other one, and I had a little bit of an issue getting that PCB in place. I used a blade to kind of push it down, and then I also used the blade plug sort of like that to apply pressure to get the holder seated. The other one was perfect, no resistance, and it went in pretty smoothly. So whatever holder you're going to use, maybe test fit, sand before you get it locked in, because it'll be a little difficult to get that one out. You could probably access it from the bottom and pop it out, but even that will probably be some resistance if you have the same issue as me. It could be from the weathering process also. Maybe it got inside. But yeah, so I wire my PCB, get it in place, put the blade plug in or blade, and screw the retention. So that'll hold that in place. And then the wires will exit from the bottom. Then I solder up my switch PCB. I get that seated with some double-sided tape on the back just to keep it in place. And then, I'll run my wires out the first piece, which looks like this. Right, you got a good view of the black one, but here's a gray one. Again, press fit. I try to design these so they're press fit, so you don't have to glue anything in place. That kind of looks like that, right? And then there's just a nice big opening for wire management. And then, then you can use the retention screw if you want to hold the PCB. Don't go crazy, just enough pressure so it's not going to move. Wires exit from the bottom, And then I just lay it down on my workbench, you know, kind of like this, with the PCB flat on the top, on the table, I mean, on the surface, and I wire to the PCB. There's going to be, let me get a PCB. If you buy the chassis, the price of the chassis is going to also include battery terminals, as well as an assembled PCB set. I'm using 3mm length pogo pins, and then you get your blade side. So I'll assemble the pogo pins for you, which just means I'm putting them on and soldering the backs of them. But what I wanted to show you here was the PCB, right? You get 3 pads for your buttons, so you get common ground, and then I don't know if that's zoomed in, but you get button 1 on the right says B1, button 2 on the left is B2, and then switch ground, which is just common. So you can wire there, and then you have your pixel pads on top. You have 1 data pad, positive, and then negative. And so, you know, I'm kind of working like this. I would do my button pads first. I'll do my pixel pads second. You can secure them if you want with a little bit of hot glue. I just, you know, a little dab just to keep the wires protected from being pulled out. But, you know, once this is locked in place, you won't really ever, you know, unless you're going to do what I did and unscrew it and pull it out. You know, there's really not much tension on that soldering joint. So, but you know, it's a good practice sometimes to put a little bit of hot glue on the, not to keep the wires soldered in place, but just to keep somebody from tugging it, right, and breaking the wires. But that'll go there. This one's not as press fit, so maybe a little hot glue. What I would do is maybe 4 dots, and then quickly push it and hold it in place until it dries, which is like 10 seconds anyway. Otherwise, maybe some E6000, and then just some tape. The tape around that to hold it in place until it cures. Okay, so that's that part. So let's put that over there. So that's part 1, right? So once you got yourself all wired up and you know, your top half is done, now you're going to take your bottom half, right? You'll line up your switches with the holes. Get your switch plate on. And then don't over tighten it. You don't want to strip these screws. And then you can reassemble. Now you might not want to finish this, right? You might want to get everything installed and in place and tested to make sure everything's working before you complete putting the rods on. Up to you, but that's usually what I do. And then again, remember, drop your spring in place first, then your rod, and then I'm kind of holding it and pinching it at the joint. Get that installed. And don't let that happen. That's what I'm talking about. The spring is still in there. Okay. Okay. Good. You will most certainly lose a spring. Just, it's unavoidable. As careful as you're going to be extra careful. Always try to keep a finger on one of those parts so they don't come flying off. Yeah, that didn't feel lined up right. Something feels like a little sticky there. Oh yeah, it's a little bit out of alignment, that's why. So maybe don't tighten this down all the way just yet. Just get it started, but loose. This way you can turn and have a little bit of play in that joint area. Still not. Oh, you know, because I probably have this tightened down. Okay. I didn't have any trouble with this, but of course now that I'm, you know, recording, it wants to give me trouble. Okay, get your last one. So as you can see, maybe you're understanding why I don't put these on until the very end, right? When I'm done and I've tested and made sure that I don't need to get back inside of the hilt, then put all this stuff on and lock it in place. But, you know, get everything in, test that it works, and then complete by tightening up. And again, don't go crazy. I'm not using Loctite on these screws. I'm getting it till I feel a little bit of resistance, like there, and then just a slight turn just to tighten it up. But that's it. Right, that's expected. The spring is holding it in place. I don't know why it's made that way. Maybe it's for ease of installation. I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I don't think you see her messing with these in the game, but I don't know, I could be wrong. Okay, so that's part one. Now part two is the no glue there. Oh, it felt like it might have, like the glue might have set on the button. But maybe it's just the decal or something. So let's use this. So, you know, your chassis would come like this. This just came off the printer a little bit ago, so I haven't, haven't cleaned up all of the supports. So, you know, there's support filament in there. I usually take an X-Acto knife and just clean it up. But I'll remove all the supports, but all of the supports are already removed with the exception of that. And then, like I said, I'll take a Scotch-Brite pad and just kind of smooth out this surface. And the other thing, you know, I print these up like that. So which on, even on a resin printer, this isn't resin, but on both a regular, you know, plastic printer, FDM, or resin-based printer, if you print on the build plate like that, you get this, what's called like an elephant's foot, right? That first layer of filament kind of presses down. So, you know, I'll take a Dremel drum wheel and just get rid of that edge. I don't know if you can see it. I can see it. So, you know, there'd be a little bit of a lip on the outside as well as the inside. I'll definitely, you know, I'll sand the outside. I don't always sand the inside because sometimes that helps keep the speaker held in place. But, you know, you test fit and you sand as necessary. but I'll definitely hit that edge there. I'll Scotch-Brite just to, because as you can see, the first time you put it in, it's not, you're going to hear it rub. So even do that, right? If what I did with the Scotch-Brite doesn't kind of even out and make it smooth, then I do this. You know, I just kind of go in and out just to kind of rough it up a little bit. And it kind of breaks down the high points. But you'll see because of that edge, right, because of that elephant's foot, it'll go in, right, but it's really snug. So that's why I drum wheel that. So the way that I install this, right, you're going to get your battery tabs, your battery terminals, negative and positive. I do the bat negative first, just wire up to the battery terminal. I use single 22 gauge wire. Insert, and you'll see on the inside here is a little hole. Let me get a flashlight. Right? Trying to get it on the camera, not really sure. There you go. So there's a little bit of support filament in there still. But, you know, insert the wire, exit from this side, and you don't need much because you're going right to the Profi board with that bat negative. On this side, which is bat positive, oh, and then a little bit of glue, right? Drop it in, a little bit of glue on the battery terminal, maybe some tape just to hold it in place while it sets. And then on this side, same thing, positive. What I do is I run a 22 gauge and a 26 gauge. Exits to the bottom, right? You can see the bottom hole here. And then you have two wire channels, right? One on the right side, left side. Those go up behind the battery, right? There's a wire channel, two of them, and they also exit right under the Profi board area. So what I do is, you know, I'll run the 22 gauge and the 26 gauge on one side. And the 22 gauge, I make the wire long enough so that it exits, right? Because that's going to go to the PCB Bat Plus. So make the wire long enough so that you have a little bit of room. You know, it may be extended 2 inches past this side and leave it there. And then the 26 gauge is going to go to the kill switch. So again, long enough that it can exit and that you have enough slack to wire to one kill switch leg here. And then I'm gluing. I just use like, you know, regular kind of like CA glue. And then I put a battery and, you know, protect the nipple and maybe even protect this with some Captain tape or electrical tape. And I use the battery to hold the terminals in place until the glue or whatever you're going to use cures. In fact, I keep one battery just for that purpose, where I have it protected, because you don't want, you know, in case you go crazy with the glue or the epoxy, you don't want that on the terminals. But yeah, so I put it in place, maybe put some tape just to hold it there. And depending on what you use, if you use E6000, that might take a while to cure. I don't use E6000 for that purpose. I use like some CA glue, some super glue on both, just a little bit. And that'll cure 5 minutes, you're done. If you want to let it cure longer, that's up to you. So battery is installed with your wires, your terminals are installed. Next I'll do the speaker, so 28 mil, right? If you use the left side for power, use the right side for your speaker wire. Get that installed, run your wires up. Again, just enough slack so that you could solder to the bottom of your soundboard, the Profi board. But you have a lot of space, right? There's a lot of space in here to hide wires, right? So not, you know, you don't have to go crazy with wire management. I would not use silicone wire. These wire channels are not that huge, right? PTFE wire. I go 26 gauge on speakers. Some people go 28 or 30. you know, whatever you prefer. But 226 will go in there, PTFE wire. I can't speak to silicone. Silicone is, the insulation is a lot thicker. I don't use it. Get your battery in. Now at this point, it should, like I said, it should be a snug fit. It might be a little loose. And the speaker itself, this lip of the speaker will be larger than the chassis, right? So you'll Dremel with a drum wheel to make that flush. So then I'll run that up, but I won't glue it in yet, right? Because in case, I don't know, maybe you have a bad speaker if you haven't tested it. You know, I leave it unglued with enough slack that I could pull it out, do whatever repairs I might need to do, or but then I'll move up, I'll get the kill switch wired, right? So 26 gauge exited here, you put that on one leg of the kill switch, a second 26 gauge wire will come back in, and that would go to Pcbs bat plus pad. So you have your negative, that would go to bat negative, your positive 26 gauge coming off the kill switch will go to your bat positive pad. And then what I do is I put this down. Now I'll have my Pcbs, which is not anything soldered to it. I'll take my Pcbs, I'll put it maybe in like a little vise, and like a hobby vise, and I'll wire my LED, my switch wires, and common ground for switch, and my data pad, data 1 pad. I'll wire those and have that all exit from the top. And then I'll attach my bat negative, my bat positive, and my 2 speaker wires. I'll get that seated in place. If you need to, you know, like I said, mine is really press fit. I don't even need to secure it with anything. But if you need to, secure it with some tape. Even at this point, if you wanted to use like electrical tape just to hold it in place. And then wire this up, right? So this is your other PCB, right? So I'll call this hilt side. Again, it'll come with the pogo pins already installed, 3mm pogo pins. And so, so what I do, hopefully you can see that, you have a bat positive pad and a bat negative pad, right? Those are for NeoPixel. So the 22 gauge wire that I ran from the bat positive terminal, that'll go right there. Your LED negative, which I run off of pads 2 and 3, doesn't matter, you use 2 pads, whatever that you want, but that'll go there. And I do single 22 gauge. If you want to do 224s, you can run 124 to the pad, and then maybe 124 to one of the solder pads if you wanted to, but I usually just go single 22 gauge. And then your data, which is marked as D. Gotta get new batteries. So there's a pad here marked D for data. The ground, the switch ground wire doesn't have a pad. There's no pad for that. You just go right to the middle solder point. So that's switch ground. And then there's 2 more pads, button 1, which is a little bit larger than button 2 pad. So what I do is I solder button 1 to the pad, but button 2, which is just to the left and just to the right of the B1 pad. So instead of trying to get my soldering iron's tip in between those and risking, bridging, I won't actually solder the wire to that pad. I'll just solder it to the back of one of the pogos. It's just easier that way. Once that's done, again, you'll have to test. It's not a perfect press fit. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. It really depends on, there's several factors when printing in plastic and in resin, flow rate and stuff like that. I won't go into crazy amount of detail, but there's a what's the right word? There's a tolerance, right? Plus or minus a certain amount of plastic. Plus, as it cools, it shrinks, right? So you're not going to get, I won't say that. Some people can get it perfect dimensionally, but for me, I'm working with an acceptable tolerance. So either it's going to be perfect and press fit, and you won't have to glue it, or you might have to glue it. Sometimes the wires will hold it in place, but once this portion is right. So remember, you have your Profi board here, maybe taped on and holding it in place. I only leave maybe 1.5, 2 inches of wires to work with. You can, again, if you want to hot glue just to help keep those wires from getting tugged at, you can do that. But I'll maybe twist a little bit, push the wires under the Profi board, get that in place. And if you need glue, again, here I wouldn't use hot glue. I would probably use E6000. Again, maybe just 4 drops, north, south, east, west, right? Think of it that way. 4 drops, get this on. And then again, maybe just some tape, on the north, south, east, west. Roll some tape over it, wrap some tape this way, and let that cure. So that's part 2. Hopefully I gave good instructions there for everything. Part 3 is when you have it in staff mode. You'll have this piece, which is, once installed, it's basically doing that. It's just big enough to touch the outer edge of the speaker to keep it in place. And so when you have it installed and you have both chassis in place, right, it's kind of looking like that. It's keeping the space, right? It's keeping the sleds held in place and allowing the sound to vent, right? And I cut grooves, 3 grooves to match the grooves inside the coupler. So, you'll seat that. You'll get one installed. And this is where it gets to be tricky, right? Because you got to get them perfectly lined up, right? I'll assume you want the buttons to be in line. So you'll get them lined up. You'll get your coupler lined up. Maybe use a tool to turn it, right? Just get something like this to get it turned in place. And then you're going to get your screws in, right? So get your screw in on both sides. Don't tighten it all the way. And then just kind of rotate, right? You can kind of see I'm pressing the hilt into my stomach as I do this. And then get all of your screw holes lined up, get your screws in, turn. And then once you get all your screws in loose, right? Just enough to hold them in place, then you can go around and sorry about that, and tighten them down. Yeah, but so that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. If you have questions, just feel free to reach out. I can answer any questions you have. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching.